Thank you. Now, Carmen, would you share a screen with our agenda for a minute so that people can see our agenda? Can we do that?
Yes, I can definitely do that. We have officially also started our live to our YouTube. I just want to make sure that that is ready to go. Okay, I see that is properly working for our individuals joining us with
Would you share your screen with our so that people can see our agenda?
Yes. Yes, I can definitely do that. We have officially also started our live to
Jeremy. You have an echo, Carmen.
I just want to make sure that that is ready to go. I see that is properly working for our individuals joining us with
Thank you.
Okay, so we do not have an echo anymore, and we will be sharing the screen at this moment with our agenda. For our audience that is listening, we do actually have two special guests here, including a Boy Scout, and so we welcome them to our special board meeting. We do have two public comments that were emailed as well, and at this moment, I will be sharing the agenda on the screen for those people who would like to see that. And we can go ahead and proceed with our board meeting.
Great. Okay, thank you. Oh, and for those who are concerned, Trustee Vasquez is unable to attend today. And so I will be working with Dr. Eckert. I am Hilda Sugarman, Vice President of the board, to help with this meeting. Thank you. Okay, Carmen, you're on.
Okay, so at this moment, I would like to proceed and read to you our guests that we welcome here tonight. We are very privileged to actually have a student, and his note reads to the Board of Trustees. Hi, we are residents of Fullerton and are here tonight for one of our Boy Scout requirements. We are learning about local government. We will just be listening and taking notes. Thank you, the Kesslers. And at this moment, we do have two public comments that I could read, and then we can proceed with our agenda. First public comment. Good evening, President Vasquez, trustees, and Dr. Pleca. My name is Vivian Moreno. As a parent and PTA representative, I have participated in the LCAP process at FSD and Fullerton Joint High School District for the past 6 years. After years of striving to positively share parents' concerns with administrators, I was excited about a documented process where parents directly communicated their priorities to administration and the board. Parents now share ways to shape our children's school experience and let administration know what was successful from their own perspective. Some parents have found LCAP participation uncomfortable while discussing confusing concepts in an education lexicon, and I worried that parents would be overwhelmed and not participate. Many parents persisted, and I stayed in this process because it is the one place where parents can ask the questions, take center stage, and tell their stories. Other stakeholders like administrators and the board members already have a platform to make their case for best practices in the educational environment. Everyone should respect each stakeholder platform and listen when it is appropriate and speak up when they have the floor. Taking the floor during another stakeholder's time may be inappropriate to appropriate their platform. If parents feel intimidated to speak up, then it is the responsibility of the administration and the trustees to provide more chances for them to feel comfortable sharing their own engagement time, not dictate how or what they contribute. A protocol for all stakeholders, in parentheses, in this case, the trustees, for addressing LCAP meetings may be in order for new trustees who may be crossing from a parent or a teacher role to don a new board member role. A timely reminder of each of the stakeholders' responsibilities during the LCAP process may lead to greater communication between all groups and gain a greater understanding of the different perspectives. Thank you for your time. Respectfully, Vivian Moreno. Last public comment. Good evening, Board of Trustees. I hope you have been healthy and safe. Thank you for meeting through the summer to address issues currently affecting our students and families. I am a parent of 2 children in the Fullerton School District. First, I want to thank our district and a special thank you to Superintendent Dr. Pleka, who has always made parent input an integral part of my process and any process. I am so blessed to know our parents' voices are heard and can have an impact. With that said, I would like to please ask our board to evaluate the needs of all school sites when looking at the LCAP breakdown for the upcoming years. We are all living in unpredictable times. What used to be predictable is no longer the case for many families and students in all of our schools. At my child's elementary school, we took great pride in the high number of on-site parent volunteers, many who took projects home to assist their children's school in an area where we lacked the resources due to not being allocated the funds. We don't know when parent volunteers will be allowed, nor do we know the financial impact the pandemic has caused to many families. However, the one thing that is evident is all students and all schools have the same needs: to learn, to feel safe, to not be hungry, and to know they matter and that their teachers and school cares about their well-being. I was part of the LCAP 2 years ago, and my input as a parent was welcomed. At the time, Dr. Flores specifically heard my input and made sure that Delta Math was offered at more schools, including my child's own school. My daughter ended up being part of the Delta Math Club the next school year, and I saw her confidence in math skills grow. This exemplifies the perfect example of parent input, district listening and modifying the LCAP in an effort to meet the needs of all students. It is my hope that we continue with this year's LCAP, which is now the LCP, and that you will continue to truly listen to all parent inputs. While the upcoming school year will be different, I am hopeful it will be a successful school year for all. Thank you for your time, Kathy, Carly, and that would conclude public comments.
Thank you very much. I think that everybody has seen this shared board agenda, and you can probably remove it now. Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with, we have 2 main things to do on this agenda. One is to review protocols, and one is to construct a letter to send to our committee for LCAP. And I believe that's the order of the agenda. Does anyone want to make any sort of changes or anything?
Well, on my agenda, it says that the LCAP comes before the board protocols.
Okay.
Yeah.
I must have an old agenda here.
Is that right?
So at one point we were going back and forth on which one. At this point, the board can decide which one. The one that is posted did have board protocols first and LCAP second, and the board can decide which one to address at this point.
Okay, well, the one I have, and I will make a motion to move the LCAP, the role of the communication with LCAP first, because that's going to be a letter we have to write, and I don't want to do that at 11:30 tonight.
We're not going to be here.
I second that.
Okay, discussion. Anybody want to add any ideas here? Is that okay with you, Dr. Eckert?
Absolutely.
Great. All those in favor, Aruni?
Aye.
Bev?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
And I'm also a yes, so that's 4-0. Thank you. Okay, so let's work on this letter. We have, I believe, well, let's ask Dr. Pletka. Do you want to go over the objectives of the letter, Dr. Pletka?
Just for clarification, are we doing a letter, or are we just, is that what we're ultimately doing tonight?
I think initially to discuss about the role of the board in terms of interaction with the LCAP committee. What is it, first of all, that you believe about that interaction? I think a discussion around that. And then ultimately, what is it you want to tell our parents? And I know all of you well enough to know that I know that you believe parent input is important, that their voice is important in this process. So I would assume that validating those things, but I think also an initial discussion, and I know Dr. Ecker as well, you were sharing, I know you had some thoughts on this as well.
Mhm.
Well, go ahead, Dr. Eckert.
Well, actually, Dr. Pletka and I have talked in preparation for this study session. And of course, one of the things on the agenda and looking at the work that Deb Dudley did with the board and trying to follow and create some consistency, I know that there was a need to sort of talk about the board's role as it relates to committees, and specifically the issue with the LCAP. And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the board feels it important to send some communication to that committee to basically reinforce their understanding of your value in their services. So, clearly, clearly the board ultimately, as I always say, is the final arbiter of what comes out of a committee when it becomes the policy of the district. You're going to have a crack out of reviewing their product and adopting it as the policy of the Fullerton School District. So you're going to have the chance for deep discussion. But during the course of the work, you want to value their work. You want them to understand that you want them to feel comfortable in sharing their individual diverse positions on certain issues. And to a certain extent, you really don't want to get in their way of doing that. So maybe a letter that sort of reinforces the fact that, your value of their services is something that is held seriously by the board, would be something you'd want to include in the letter. And to be sure that you communicate also that, it's not your understanding of your role to get in their way of sharing truly what they think the Fullerton School District should be providing in terms of, you want to hear from them. You don't necessarily have to agree, but you want to give them sort of free opportunity to discuss and not feel intimidated or directed. So I would think that maybe in the letter, you'd want to include something of that nature. And that was what Bob and I talked a little bit about. I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Is there somewhere in CSBA or somewhere where our role in LCAP is sort of spelled out? I mean, I know what it is. We let them do the work and then we accept it with our changes and go back. We're really not part of the building block of LCAP, but is there somewhere that that's written?
Because LCAP is relatively, Janny, new. It's relatively new. I mean, it's been in, we've had the LCAP now for 6-7 years. But remember and to answer your question directly, I would think that in the CSBA training, there might be some guidance in terms of the board's role on committees in general, which would certainly include the LCAP. I don't know, and I can't reference anything specific in any of their documents, but I am sure that in the many trainings they give, it would fall under the board's role in district-wide committees and certainly stakeholder committees. So again, I don't know if that answers your question, Janny, but I do know that LCAP, remember, is part and parcel of a new funding program that went into place to replace the revenue limit funding program we had earlier. It created we created the local control funding formula, and that funding formula was supposed to fund and be developed as it relates to what stakeholders feel is important that a district delivers. And those priorities are very different in any district. You can travel from one district to another, and each district's stakeholders will feel differently. So in the Fullerton School District, the way you spend your money needs to be aligned with the LCAP. That's why that LCAP is so important. And you want to be sure you're not obliged to approve everything in an LCAP. A lot of people think that the board is obligated to provide anything in an LCAP. You're not. But you are required to go through a series of steps whereby one of the very most important steps is the engagement of your stakeholders. And as part of the LCAP plan, staff needs to be able, and the board needs to be able to document how you engage them, how you open the door for their input, how you listen to them. So in that light, I would think that you do not want to give the impression to stakeholders that, yeah, you're holding a committee meeting, but the board already pretty much knows how they're going to spend their money. You don't want that impression given. You want to be able to weigh what you see are the needs out there. So, you know, we're talking about what goes in a letter, and I'm assuming there are people out there that might feel that the board overstepped its bounds. You might want to address those issues in the letter. I don't know if does that help at all?
I think Joey's trying to say something. Joey, in addition to your comment, could you also maybe talk about the new changes? Like LCAP has gone through maybe 6 new templates over the last 6 years. And I guess the most recent one from January of this year was codified in an assembly bill. And I think what I had read about that was that, so it's about engaging stakeholders like Mark has said, but it's about making sure that funding is getting to the most in need students in a district. Could you maybe just help us understand that a little bit?
Well, what I was gonna speak to, and what I can speak to, is to answer the initial question by Board Member Meyer, that, you know, is that process, you know, codified anywhere? And it is in the Ed Code, which is the relevant Ed Code, I think, that answers the question is Ed Code 52062. And what it states is, and it kind of has a laundry list, and I won't read it all, but it says, before the governing board of a school district considers the adoption of the LCAP plan, it has to do the following things. And those are getting the input from the various parental advisory committees and other stakeholders, and having public hearings before the board actually weighs in on what that plan is. So I think that if the question is there some, you know, somewhere where it's actually codified in law, that's really, you know, what we're talking about. With regards to specifics of the LCAP revisions, I'd have to say that I particularly am not that well versed in the LCAP. Another one of my partners, Dina Harris, is one of our experts in that area. But, you know, I do say that, you know, you're correct that there have been revisions to the LCAP with regards to the sources of funding and where those particular funds may or should go with regards to certain types of students and certain types of areas with regards to low income, et cetera. So
Thank you for stepping in, Joey. I appreciate that. So, but that would be part of the information that a committee would be given from the district, correct?
correct. Mhm.
And then if the board wants to make changes when it comes back to us, that could be done.
Yeah, I think the key with the Ed Code really is this idea that the board, in essence, really isn't even considering the adoption or getting involved with that part of it until all these steps actually happen with the stakeholders. Yeah.
And just so that our community knows, that committee was made up of classified personnel, certificated personnel, administrative personnel, parents from all sorts of groups, independent people who don't have necessarily a child in our school district, and they get together to come up with what they feel is most important. Bev, you had your hand up.
I think that Joey pretty much covered it. I was going to read to you just the information that I have on at my fingertips. Just, conceptually, it's brought through a committee. The committee then presents it to the board. The board then reviews it at that time, has the opportunity to make any input on what they might want to see. It's also open to public input at that time, where everyone then has a chance to do it. Comes back again for a final reading along with the budget. It has had several changes to the template itself, including this last one where they talk more about where the funding is coming from and how it's allocated. And in fact, even to throw more, another wrench in there, the LCAP is now LCAP 2, which is not this LCAP, but another LCAP that we are going to have to submit in September, going to this committee. So I think that this is important because we are going to have to get input from our LCAP committee for even the new LCAP on how we have reacted to COVID. So,
Jenny?
The reason I asked the question was because I think that's a starting point for us to look at Ed Code, and then we can say that we are supporting Ed Code as a board. This is how we want to do the process. And if the process says kind of stay out of it and let the stakeholders put their piece in, that's what I want to see. Instead of us making up something that's coming from us, this is rock solid. It's coming from Ed Code, and a great way to start a letter and support it, and maybe say, if we have not done this in the past, we apologize. We don't have to apologize, but we can say this is where we're moving forward. This is how we will proceed when the LCAP, and we value blah, blah, blah. I think we can pull that together pretty.
I think Jenny's got the right idea on that one. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that, Jenny, about how we get that written today.
Well, maybe staff, could we direct staff of the direction we want and let them craft something? Is that appropriate?
I would second that motion.
Yep. Do you feel comfortable with that?
I do, yeah.
I think
Okay.
Dr. Pletka did such a wonderful job with his last letter that I feel very confident in his or somebody else's ability for the next letter.
So let's
Thanks.
just come up with,
Thank you, Aruni.
hi, Dr. Pleka, let's come up with the pertinent things we want to say. One thing we want to say for sure is thank you for your work. We appreciate that unquestionably. And the second thing we want to say is we want to go along with Ed Code because that's who we are. And we look forward to hearing.
We want to support Ed Code, not
want-
Bob will put it together. He'll do one.
Okay. Concept of apology. How does everybody feel about that?
What Jenny said about if we haven't if we haven't conveyed our commitment to LCAP and the Ed Code in the past, we will do so in the future. I really liked that, Jenny. So that was great.
Moving forward. This is
Yeah.
how we will proceed.
Dr. Pletka, is that the full breadth of what you need to know to create a letter that's appropriate in thanking our committee?
May I add something?
Oh, certainly.
I also want to make sure, and I'm sure that you'll do this, is to recognize the value in which we hold on our committee. And that what this board truly does is appreciates their time and their efforts, and will consider everything that they come up with within their own committee. And again, it goes back to this group of people have been meeting for years. They had been meeting for months. They've had several meetings. And when we go in and say things that we want to have them forward to us, it makes them feel discounted. And so I just want to make sure that the people in that room know that we value what their input is, and that we understand we have our time to make that, to make our own suggestions and changes. But I can't say how much I truly do appreciate and want them to realize that it's time, it's their time. And when you sit on a committee for months and agonize over programs and agonize over what things are best for their kids, and then if they feel like they are not being listened to, all that time and effort that we spent on promoting authentic family engagement goes out the window. And so I just want to make sure that all of our stakeholders understand that is something that's very, very important to this board.
Could I,
Beyond just parents,
Could I-
everybody on the committee.
Stakeholders, right?
could I add, maybe, could each one of you, I think I can kind of aggregate what you said, but maybe each share the one important thing you want the committee to know from you. And I think there's consensus. So I didn't hear a lot of divergent perspectives on this, but what is the one thing? And so Bev, you just shared yours. Is Janie, what's the one thing you really want the committee to know?
Well, how important it is that we follow the process so that the kids get the money and the right programs, and we feel what they have found is important. We need to have that communicated to us. So that's important to me, to get their input, and they need to feel comfortable being very, very honest about giving their opinion about that. Because we want to know, even if it's a little sensitive.
Rooney?
Well, I think what Trustee Berryman said about valuing their time was key to me, but if that's already included in what Bev said, then I really did think that the operative purpose of this letter would be to convey that if these commitments and respect and honoring their time hadn't been felt in the past, that it would be in the future, going forward.
And I think I would just ditto what everybody else said and tell them that we know they come from different perspectives, and that's what makes their opinions so important. And we really want them to feel free and open without anything to do with us, because there are so many ways to prioritize. And I'm sure that the leadership in that committee, whoever's leading it, will share all the different things that have been prioritized in our board goals, and how much money we have to spend on commitments that we cannot alter, salary, whatever, but that we really trust their opinions, and we wait to hear what their suggestions are, and we thank them. Thanking them is like really important to me.
And Bob,
Annie.
I would add one more thing, because you might throw in something about in the COVID time, things are going to be quite different. We're going to need their help more than ever with these tough times. Kind of throw something in that how much their work is going to be even more appreciated, as we need to hear their input.
Great, thank you. Okay.
So you've got everything you need, Bob?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And we look forward to seeing that letter. Do you think that letter is possible by our Tuesday meeting? It's okay if it isn't, I'm just asking.
Yes.
That would be nice, because then we could get it out very quickly.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
We'll have something drafted for the Tuesday meeting. And then if there's any final thoughts or words you want to add at that time, you can do that. And then we can literally have it signed and sent out to them on Wednesday.
Is that good with everybody? Okay, it looks good. Thank you. Thank everybody for your input here. I think we're all on the same page. So now we're ready for the next part of our board meeting, which is our board protocols. And we have a whole list. Okay, you want to start, Dr. Eckert?
Sure. Well, you know, what I did is I've got the same document that you have. I believe you have that summary document from Deb. And, you know, what I did in reading over that and in preparing for this and in speaking with Dr. Pletka, I don't want, you know, to redo a lot of the stuff that the board has already accomplished. So what I did is I went over each one of the protocols, and I've got some notes in front of me, and I thought I would start with the one at the top and work down, Hilda.
Okay, starting with United Board.
Yeah, actually starting with the first one that says board member requests. The one I have down here is starting with board member requests.
Okay, let me find.
Now, a lot of these you've talked about already, so it shouldn't take us much time at all. I was just going in order of Deb's memo. I was just going down there. Am I missing on her first part? She had on her first page, she identified some of the goals, and then she went to the next steps the board should include, and then she lists protocols.
Okay, and my first one, that step is say something if somebody's is different. Mine says regarding setting the board meeting agenda.
Yeah. Let me see now. What do I have down here?
Well, can I just say,
Yes.
Mark, did you receive that document from Carmen? And if so, can we just all get a quick email of that same document, and that way we're all on the same page?
Sure, we could do that. And let me just tell you the order that I was going to go down. And Aruni, yes, we can do that. I'm sure Carmen will send that out. But
We have it, don't we have it?
I
Is it
thought
something
you-
different
I thought
than what
you
we
did.
have?
The order of the topics that I had on mine were as follows. I had down board member requests. Then I had setting the agenda. Then I had community complaints. Then I had progress toward action. Are you looking at a different document that I'm looking at? Then I
got
had
the same
board
thing.
deliberations.
It's the letter from Deb Dudley, right?
Yes.
Right, it's the letter that
Yeah.
that Carmen sent out last week.
And then I had unified board where I went to that.
Okay.
So I've got them all. I think we all are looking at it. I just took it in order from the memo from Deb.
And then after unified board is board meeting timing, individual board members meeting with staff, et cetera, right?
Correct. And I think you've done a lot of work on many of these, and all I was going to do is try to bring some consensus together. And I was going to start with, I always like starting with what our goals should be. So if you're ready, Hilda, I'm prepared. Yeah, there you go.
It's any order you put it.
Good. Yeah, that's what I've got.
Okay.
So the goals, Deb had about 9 different goals. I sort of condensed them into 5. That where we're going on this is, number 1, develop guidelines or protocols to allow the governance team to move forward on, number 1, working together as a team toward addressing the needs of the school district, building on differing opinions to drive consensus around effective strategies, creating a trusting relationship through transparency, inclusiveness, and open and honest dialogue. And then a 4th one that I wrote down, it might not be in front of you, and Aruni, I took the comment, we had a little discussion about surprises. And I thought that was very insightful and timely on your part. So I threw that into the goal to refrain from surprises that might catch other members of the team unprepared. Doesn't mean we don't disagree. There will be many cases where we'll bring differing opinions forward, but I was talking about non-routine items that on important items, if our effort as a member of a team is never to surprise anybody. And then the fifth one was staying within our role. So those are what was sort of driving my thought as we begin the discussion of each one of these. Does anyone, is everyone okay with that as a goal?
Let me jump in there real quick. A couple of these, we do have existing protocols. And so, and my sense was that our existing protocols, there wasn't a sense to changing them. So one of them in 2017, there was a vote that the board president can put items on. And so, at this point, I didn't get the sense that the board wanted to change that particular protocol. But again, that's, if somebody wants to weigh in on that, there's a few of these though that are brand new that we don't have existing protocols for. And so maybe looking at some of those new ones as a potential place to start.
Well, let me ask the board, does anybody have any issues with the board president putting something on the agenda?
Can I just jump in there, please, Trustee Sugarman?
Sure.
Two things, because just from what Mark was mentioning, I did think that there was some consensus that we weren't going to address that particular protocol until after the current term was completed. That was my recollection and understanding.
That's my understanding too.
Yes,
Okay.
that was mine.
And then the second thing was that, Mark, just to be totally clear, the first time we met with you, I believe it was your stated opinion that an agenda item doesn't really constitute a surprise because we all get them well in advance, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Then I think if we maybe, since you said you have 5 topics, can we make it 3 tonight?
Sure. I don't intend, and I don't intend to go into depth on any of those 5, Rooney. I just wanted to start the discussion with why we're doing this. So I just wanted to make sure that when I was thinking of why the board is taking their time to reach consensus over protocols, those would be the reasons that would be our goal. That we're trying to become better at what we do. We're trying to move forward. And those are the only reason I shared those 5. They're not on the agenda necessarily. I always like to begin with, why am I doing this? And those are sort of that's where what I was thinking. And I only shared them with you to see, are you thinking the same thing or not?
I just one other comment to weigh in on. I think Trustee Meyer and I probably felt this way the most after we completed the survey, but then when we did the meeting, which I thought was a great meeting. Deborah Dudley did a wonderful job. And I think everybody was really open, and honestly, I think that meeting in itself restored a lot of trust, just from my perspective.
Right.
But Trustee Meyer, didn't you also agree that a lot of our answers were a little skewed, and we kind of just put it back on COVID and just being cooped up and not being together? That was my sense of it as well, that we are all, maybe as a board, also suffering from some of the disassociation and frustration with the current situation that everybody's in.
Right.
Jenny?
Yes, no, I agree with you. We, filling out that survey, we were doing it for the moment rather than the big picture. We were looking at the last month or 2 or 3, and we should be looking at 5 years down the road.
Right. Very, very good. Well, with that as a jumping off point, it just gives you an example. The first protocol that I think you've talked about, because I know Deb, and from the work that I read, it was a very successful meeting. The first protocol was board member requests. And what I wrote down for myself here that I was asking you was, is the board ready to move ahead with this protocol? I believe that this has been discussed already. Can we move forward? And that was the information that was provided under board member requests for information from district staff. Remember, this is that was in that paragraph, and I'm just curious where the board is with that protocol.
Well, let's ask. Does anyone want to make a statement there?
I thought our consensus, pardon me for just kind of jumping in on all of these, but I thought our consensus when we went through this with Ms. Dudley was that our request time limit is maybe a little bit more generous, the 2 hours as I recall, but that we felt comfortable with that because there was a sense from Dr. Pletka that that's not really being abused. But Dr. Pletka, I'd really like to hear from you on that one because it's really staff time, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I think, I mean, we do have a protocol about the 2 hours. I think generally that, I mean, that's really fair. I think the only issue sometimes is in aggregate. And so, you know, in some cases, we can just let the board know. I mean, if we have 2 or 3 requests kind of piling up and each of them are 2 hours and then we get another set all within, you know, a few days. So, you know, I don't know what exact word we put in the protocol, but I would just say to be mindful that the 2 hours in aggregate, that it's not too much more than that, you know, in a given amount of time.
Yeah.
I remember it was Trustee Sugarman that said that it's up to staff to tell us no, right? Wasn't that sort of our?
There we go.
Just about to say that, Rooney. Part of this protocol issue is if I ask for something and Rooney asks for something and Janie asks for something and Bev asks for something, now you've got 8 hours. That's a lot of time and it takes staff away from their work. And I know that somewhere in teaching how to be an administrator, and that falls on Dr. Eckert, people are told to be respectful for board members. But really, the team has to say to us, you know, we already have 2 requests. Do you mind if we push this down the road? Or they have to say, gee, this is really pertinent and very timely, but I need to ask another board member if I can put theirs down the road. And if staff has that courage, or if they make the superintendent do it, then we would be better in this situation because each of us have our little questions to ask and reports we want.
And I would want to make sure that staff feel comfortable doing that because I think that, I mean, obviously this has been an issue in the past and it's happened and I don't know if they felt comfortable saying no in the past. So we have to give them the blessing that they have the authorization to do that because going forward, we need to make sure that you're concentrating on running the district and we shouldn't be sending you on many special projects.
Right.
Jenny?
I think you're going to have a hard time having staff ignore things or say there's not enough time. I'm wondering if you could put a clause in there that said, if you request for information, you need to get another board member's approval if you want it within 24 hours or something. I mean, asking them to do something and get it to you before the meeting, I think that's what the pressure is. Given enough time, so maybe there should be some kind of time frame in there. I hate to lock things down with a lot of rules, but we've got to give them some flexibility because they're going to do it. I mean, you've got an amazing staff and they're not going to say no to a board member.
Right. Hilda, can I make a suggestion?
Of course.
Because I think we can, I've got this very organized in front of me, but I'm obviously failing in making it clear, what I've got in front of me, in front of you. So I have 10 protocols in front of me. The protocol number 1 that I brought up was the board board member requests for information
Right.
of staff. The protocol, the 7th protocol I have in front of me was the board meeting and the timing of the board meetings. The discussion we had about starting at 6, ending at 9 with one extension, that discussion. Maybe the two are linked in some way, but my protocol number 1 that I was asking relative to whether the board felt like you are together on this was the protocol that was on Deb's second page that deals with board acknowledges that district staff must be focused on district visions and goals, and board members should direct all requests to the superintendent, that business. So, and maybe the issue of the 2 hours was a metric that was used that would indicate that it went over and it wasn't appropriate to be, that it should need to go through the superintendent rather than to a different staff member.
Maybe just
So-
one,
I'm sorry,
One-
go ahead, Bob.
I can just say one suggestion. I think the protocol is fine. I think in terms of, under 2 hours, I would just add one sentence about that the aggregate of multiple reports are also within the 2 hours within, let's say, that week. So literally keeping the protocol, but if the request for information from a board member in aggregate of requests are more than 2 hours, that either we say no at that moment, or at the very least, that those requests are put off for a future time. So I think the basic protocol is fine. I think the issue is sometimes if somebody requests 4 or 5 or 6 different reports, and each one of those reports are 2 hours, now you're talking about 12 hours. So it's not a huge deal. I think keeping the protocol and just adding that the aggregate of reports for that request doesn't exceed the 2 hours, over that week or within the given amount of time.
I would agree with that. I think that makes sense.
I think that would be acceptable as long as I think the board is, well, 2 clarifications. With the frequency that we have been meeting in the last few months, I feel that it is far greater than what we're supposed to be doing, which is twice a month, right? I mean, are we pretty much in agreement that we should be meeting twice a month and maybe once during the summer, if possible, and then, take that time to set some other meetings if things are, if there's another pandemic or something? Is that it? Because I think
Aruni, excuse me, some of our meetings for clarification were special board meetings, like the one with Deb and this one, which added to our meeting time. And then we had a topic, which it's another thing I'd like to discuss. I believe that a board meeting is a meeting for the board to do the business of the district. And we had 3 meetings on one topic because we had many, many hours of community input, and that curtailed our ability to finalize at a board meeting or 2 board meetings what we needed to do. Now that sounds pretty crummy a statement to make to the public, but the truth is because of Zoom, we got all the public comments, we read them, we appreciated them, and by putting on hours of reading, that made us have 3 meetings when we could have had 1 or maybe 2. So it was partially because of COVID that we had a lot of meetings, and it was partially because of special board meetings like Deb's and this board meeting. So they're not really board meetings, they're special. And that's why we had so many. Yes.
I guess what I was trying to say, and maybe it didn't come out right, but by increasing the frequency of meetings, we can, I think, and I wanted to make a distinction before I go on with that thought. Request for information is outside of a motion that we're asking staff to deliver a report on. These are informal requests in between meetings on items that might be of interest to a board member, but may not be on an agenda because somebody wants to learn something or compare an issue now versus 10 years ago, right? We're talking about informal requests.
Yes.
I guess
yes.
what I was trying to say, and I should have led with this, is that I think with more frequent board meetings, we would have more formal requests for information and less informal requests. That's my suspicion. And what I then meant to say was none of us should be afraid of more meetings because of the amount. We've all built meeting muscle in the last few months. So that's what I was trying to say. So yeah, Dr. Pletka, I mean, I think the 2 hours sounds really low because basically what could happen is somebody, unbeknownst to one of us, makes a big request, it then goes into motion, and then any other request that week is potentially over the 2 hours. So
Is that per board member or compiled?
I was gonna just say per board member.
Right,
in that case, I'm totally fine with that.
right.
Right. And there, going along with Rooney's comments, which I agree with, if a board member feels strongly about a particular topic that he or she needs some information on that goes well beyond 2 hours, let's say it's something that takes weeks, I'm exaggerating, but takes weeks to do the research on this, then then the other venue would be that board member would have a conversation with the superintendent, and possibly this would come on as an information item in a board meeting where the board then discusses, maybe this is something that we're going to need to all be together on. I understood this as just separate individual member requests, as you said, Aruni, and more board meetings naturally will reduce that a little bit.
I think 2 hours per board member per week is great.
Good. All righty.
Thank you, Dr. Pletka, for adding that, because I think that really is what we needed to hear.
I've misunderstood this because Dr. Pletka originally said an aggregate, and an aggregate would mean 2 hours total.
I was just talking about, let's say a board member asked for 4 or 5 items, and while it's true that each of those reports may only be an hour and a half or 2, but now you're at 10 hours, and the issue isn't the amount of work. The issue is, at some point, the direction from the whole board was to accomplish something, whether it's goals, expectations. And if in the end it's outside of those, it's okay. If it's a few hours, we want to provide that. We want to be of service to the board. But at some point, it begins to take away from what the board has asked us to do. So that's, I think, the issue, not necessarily whether it's hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's what is it? Again, I think it's about clarity. What is it the board wants staff to do? And so ultimately, we use the goals, we use board policy, we look at board direction at the dais, and we're working towards that. And so I think we want to accomplish that. We want to do that for you. But we also, I mean, if there are individual requests, we try to do those, but we're just, in some cases, we're juggling those two things, the requests of the majority of the board with individual requests. And I think 2 hours per board member is quite fine. And be honest, that doesn't happen very often. I don't remember the last time I had 5 board members make a request, but it's not unusual for a board member maybe to request 5 or 6 items. So
do we need to change the protocol with that addition of a single board member cannot, 2 hours, a limit for a single board member? Okay, so it's not an aggregate of 5 of us. It's each person.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I think it's a simple change because as it's written, and I sent a draft just now to Dr. Pletka and Carmen that I see. It's just simply making this change because it does state that that it's by a board member. So the way I fixed it was to say an individual request, comma, or aggregate of requests by a board member that require staff to create reports, et cetera, that require more than 2 hours. So all you really need to do is to add the or aggregate of requests before by a board member, and I think that does the trick.
And per week, right?
Well,
I-
per board minute. Wow. Is it per week or is it between board minute meeting?
I thought I heard Dr. Pletka say per week.
Dr. Pleka?
I think generally that would be okay. If we're getting 3 and 4 board members requesting 2 hours per week, that does begin to take the staff away. So I would say generally that's okay, but again, if it becomes a combination of reports and requests from multiple board members, that at that point, some of those items may be delayed to the following week.
Got it. So what I understand, Dr. Pletka, for as far as clarification, is that the 2 hours aggregate request by a single board member per week would mean that a board member could come up and make a request that was an hour and a half that week. But the following week, if that board member had another request, they're still within the guidelines to request that the second week. Is that what you're saying?
Sure, and I know we're trying to be really discreet about it, and I would say generally we don't need to be that discreet about it, but what has happened is sometimes we'll literally get 5 or 6 requests, and in aggregate, it may be 15 or 20 hours. And I think that's more of what we're trying to balance here, again, with clarity between what the board has directed us to do as a whole and as a group. But I'm fine per week because it typically hasn't been an issue in the protocol to say that at some point, if we get multiple requests, we may have to schedule them over the next couple of weeks.
Got it. Are we?
I think we need to remember when we do the protocols, it's not just for us today. It takes on a life with new members who will come on board, and it always can be changed. But I think it's good to set the protocol so somebody new comes on board. We've established some protocol as we do this.
And I just wanted, as we finish with this one, because I think we've all reached a consensus on this, that I'm listening to Dr. Pletka share. In my mind, staff is going to do everything it can to meet the needs and the requests of the board members. I don't think he's going to have a ledger that identifies, I think this is more just an overall scope that if you tend to field a lot of requests and those start getting up well beyond the 2 hours, it could impact the ability to move the district forward because you're changing, you only have so much time. But I get that it seems to me that the spirit is that anything staff is, that their primary interest is to meet your needs and to do what they can to do that. So I've got the 2 hours per week aggregate by board member. It seems like everyone's in agreement, Bob.
Yeah. And I also see protocols as a tool for our staff to be able to go back to so that they feel comfortable in being able to say, this is becoming too much. I can't do this, and they have at least something behind them to help them with that. So
Got it. All righty. Hilda, are we ready to move on to the number 2?
We are ready for number 2.
Good. Okay.
So we don't need to vote on that. There's nobody who's uncomfortable, is there? Or is there anybody uncomfortable?
No, I thought we did reach a very nice consensus on the previous one, but Mark, or Joey, please remind me, with protocols, it's something, if we vote on it tonight, it's done, or is it still one reading?
Well, this isn't teed up for an action item tonight, so I think what would happen is that when the full board's together at the next meeting, the board can vote. It only takes one vote for one reading and vote for the protocol, unlike changing the bylaws or the policy. So what basically what we're getting is a direction from you for Dr. Pletka to put on the agenda that revised protocol or that protocol for you to vote on. at the
Okay,
next
thanks
meeting.
for the clarification. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm ready for the next item. That's
All righty. Okay, the next item then is it's on the screen, for those of you. I believe,
Mark, can Carmen expand the shared screen, please? Make the document larger? Or maybe in a way that has well, if it's larger, we'll be able to see the multiple protocols at one time, and I would
yeah,
appreciate
I'm
that.
only addressing that one that says board protocol regarding setting board agendas. That one, yeah. See if you can make it larger.
Is that a little bit better?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, good.
You're
Thank
too
you,
young
Arun.
not to be able to see that.
Yeah, I didn't want to mention my eyesight on that, so I appreciate you covering for me on that. Now, we had a lot of, I know our first meeting, we had some discussion, and I'm sure with Deb, you had some discussion. Would you read that to yourself? And does that reflect where the board is right now regarding the setting of board meeting agendas?
Okay, I have a question here. The second paragraph reads, each agenda item shall reflect the district's vision and goals of the board focus on student learning. Does that mean that each agenda item should be weighed against our goals? And if it doesn't meet that, then would the president or the superintendent have to ask the board to put it on the agenda? No, okay, that's fine. It was very specific in the second paragraph.
Yeah. Yeah, Hills, I don't know, Bob might have a comment on that. Usually something like that is a catch-all. Everything you do, whether it's in a direct manner or a support manner, is to focus on student learning. So, even the bus driver bringing the children to school during those times when they did that, even the cafeteria worker feeding the children, it all comes down to supporting the child's ability to learn. So that's how I read that. Dr. Pletka, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Deborah talked about the idea that as we work, if I remember right, she had the chart that showed effective boards and then boards not quite as effective. And one of the things that they focus on is student learning. And I think that's, if I remember right, that's kind of the context for that piece. And I mean, even parent engagement ultimately is about supporting student learning. So I think that's where she's put that in there. And again, she kind of referenced a study that she showed. The rest of this board protocol, in essence, I think we kind of talked about it at the beginning of the meeting, which is it was voted on in 2017, and that basically my understanding is that she had kind of agreed that protocol was going to stay in place. I think she just modified it with the piece about focus on student learning. So I think that's the only maybe new aspect of that. So, my thought is, if you want to add that to our existing protocol about focusing on student learning, that would be up to you. But at this point, my sense is that you weren't ready to change or didn't want to change because you had voted on this already. And then I guess my question to you is, do you want to add, if you guys want to give input on, do you want to add the piece about student learning to our existing protocol? Or are you ready just to move on to protocol number 3 because we've already kind of addressed this in the past?
I think if we were going to add it, I would add it when it's, I think that it's important enough to say that when we put stuff on the agenda, it should be about our goals or about student learning. I don't mind putting that on that. And so that at least we know that when we do, we're not putting something on the agenda that says we're worried about, the street sweeper, cleaning. And so you're again saying that when you put something on the agenda, it's well within this board's privy to make a decision on. It's not something that's outside of what we do. And I think, as Jani's point was, that we're setting up protocols and setting up, future boards to be able to, stay the course of whatever we have control over. And I think that kind of reflects that.
Aruni, did you want to comment on this?
Yes, I totally respect what Trustee Berryman has said. And I just feel that this language actually, based on everything that we've talked about previously, and based on everything that I've seen on this board, I feel that this language, it does state some things that we don't already have in our protocol, but I've never felt that anything on our agenda was not related to student learning. I feel it's a little bit redundant, and if it was okay with the majority of the board, I would prefer to just go on to number 3 at this time. But
Jani?
I'm good with moving forward on it.
We do have it on our existing protocol already, though.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's already on our existing protocol.
yeah,
I
I
think
feel like
this-
number 2 is what we already do. So
This is
I mean,
the
it
exact,
says-
I think this is the exact language. I double checked.
Right, it's already
This is the
there.
exact language, yeah.
Right, so we're not changing anything.
I don't see the issue here. Let's move forward. Really?
Good.
I think, yeah, I think you're all together on this. We did spend a lot of time on the first meeting, but I think this is, Aruni, where we had reached consensus that if we're going to change anything outside of that second paragraph, it would wait until after the next election, this kind of thing. But yeah, okay. The way it's written, everyone seems to be comfortable with at this point. Let's move on to protocol number 3. And that has to do with dealing with community complaints or concerns. And my note to myself said, as I read number 3 down here, under the, let me see.
Board's response.
Yeah, the board's response. I said that, that it was I felt that you might have already discussed this in length again. And my question to myself was, are we together on this protocol and ready to reach consensus on this? Is there anything in this descriptor that you might have an issue with?
I think that when this was originally brought to us by Deb, that it was like, maybe this is something that other boards have a problem with, but she
Yeah.
didn't have a thorough, deep enough history on this school district.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we can move on. How do you feel about that, Bev?
I was going to ask Dr. Pleka what he thinks.
Dr. Pleka?
What's your question? I missed your question, Deb. Bev.
Just, do you feel Hilda's comments about the next protocol about response to community complaints or concerns, do you feel that this is something we need to address?
Potentially maybe for future boards. I haven't seen we'll just say of late, I haven't seen this as an issue. I
think we had one issue at some point.
There was at one point, I know with solar, there was a little bit of back and forth a little bit, but since then there really hasn't been. I feel like the board does send complaints, concerns to me. We've had our fair share during COVID-19, people sharing their concerns, and the board's been great about forwarding those items. So I don't necessarily see it as a concern, other than, to Jani's earlier point, you put something into place for the future. That would be just up to you.
may I just add a comment? I know that the way that the comment, or maybe this protocol should be, how the board responds to public, questions, right? And I think that's the main thing, because what we're really talking about is making sure the board and staff, when we're talking about a sensitive issue, that we're trying to speak as one, and recognizing that the minimum way that we do that is with 3 votes on an issue. And it would be very bad for, it takes us off of our message, and I think it can be distracting. But I just wanted to add, can you scroll down a little bit? What was the topic again? The way that it's.
Board members' response to community complaints or concerns.
So that one is one that I just wanted to put out there. I don't think it's appropriate. Public comments, we had so many written, and I thought that it was, I didn't think it was appropriate that public comments were made anonymously. And I think that if we're talking about not just ourselves, but future boards, I think that's a big favor that we can do to people. I think it's, not just that it's cowardly, but I think it's really irresponsible, and somebody can submit really hateful or incorrect information. And I just thought that the board, and I don't think it really fits under this protocol, but I do think it's something that the board should address. We get the public comments beforehand, but I think we as a board should just be more mindful of anonymous letters. I think they're dangerous. I think they're poisonous. So people should attach their name, because if you come in person, we know who you are and we can see what's happening. But somebody comes and reads somebody's letter or something like that, it just gets muddled. And I don't think that we as a board should be submitted to that kind of stuff as well. It's really for our own well-being and for just an honesty of the debate.
Right.
That's a really good point, Aruni, but I don't think that that's on this one.
Right.
So
I agree.
can we make a note on that and come
Right.
back to it at a later time? Janie?
I think the protocol is written well. I think it says everything we want. We just need to enforce it.
Yeah.
When it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with the protocol. I think there have been times where people have not followed the protocol. I think that's the issue. And that's our fault for not doing a check on it. And then I make a comment on Aruni, because we can check on the legals here so we can ask them, but I think like in the city council, they tell you have to put your name and address. I don't think that's legal.
Yeah.
You're right. The Brown Act, it is kind of an interesting thing, because we are dealing with a different time where it is a lot easier, as was stated, to possibly have folks submit things anonymously, or that we don't really know. If they're coming in, at least you can see the face, you can see that this is a person making the statement. The problem is that the Brown Act specifically says that you cannot require an individual to state their name or address, which is a misconception, because a lot of city councils have always tried to require that. And you always have the 1 or 2 folks that will say, I don't have to do that, because they've looked at the Brown Act. So unless there's a change hopefully we're all back to public meetings soon, but there is that kind of loophole where with regards to the emails, that it does make it difficult to really confirm that we're hearing from an individual or not multiple individuals or such. So you actually couldn't legally require that.
Right.
I agree with you, Aruni. I think the anonymous is not good, but I don't think legally we can.
Let me add, the 2 parts to this protocol. The point, Aruni, that you made has been a frustration for years. The fact that, people can make a complaint, and sometimes a serious one. The only way you can follow up on a complaint really is to go to the source. And when you don't know who that is, it undermines the credibility of the complaint. And I agree, Joey's absolutely right. I remember my board asking we don't want to deal with any complaints unless the person's name's on it. We're not obviously we weren't allowed to do that, but it does undermine the credibility of the complaint. And, I always tell people, look, if you are concerned about something and you want to criticize, at least let us know who you are and give us the background to this criticism. But it is a frustration that has existed for a long time. In terms of the protocol regarding community complaints, I like the fact that you've talked about this, because all of you are problem solvers. And when people who know you come up to you and file a complaint, the first thing a lot of us want to do is solve the problem. And having a protocol like this gives you directions and reminds you that, you're one member of a team. And really, the superintendent should know about this, and you need to hold the superintendent, accountable to looking into it, which I'm sure he will. So it sounds like you're together on this particular language.
I think so.
I think so. Bev? Jenny? Good. We can move on. Thank you.
God,
Thank you all for agreeing.
man, you guys have taken agreement pills before this meeting. You guys are great. Okay, number 4.
I guess Joey will have to tell you, those aren't legal anymore either.
Yeah, Joey.
Although they're still trying.
Okay, my number 4 was this thing called progress toward action. It just was 3 items. Do you see it? There you go.
Yes.
When I read that, and you're going to have to enlighten me a little bit, I read it in terms of how we go from one step to finally getting something on the agenda for board deliberation and a vote. And usually the only thing that we're moving it, number 1 on that. Carmen, could you there you go. A little bit, where did it go? Oh,
Here
there it is, right there.
Number 4.
Number 4, it says, item is placed on the agenda for board direction. Should staff research this? Should staff time or resources be allocated? Usually, we have, and I think you as well do, a section for new business where people can bring up things. I was assuming this is something on number 1 under 4 that wasn't agendized per se. I might be wrong, but I read it that it wasn't agendized. It might be an issue of board concern. Should it start with under new business? Let's say Bev has something that she wants to raise for the board. She chats about it. She brings it up under new business. And then it moves to the board deciding whether we move to 2 or 3. Now, am I misreading that? But that's generally how I looked at it.
I think I'll give you an example of this one. It's for resolutions. So if something like a resolution were to come to the board,
Got it.
I think what this is outlining is the fact is before a resolution comes as a written resolution, that the idea comes to the board talks about the item and decides or they vote on it if in fact that item should be then researched and then go to the next steps.
Right.
I think that's what that was for.
Okay, now I understand. If there is an item that comes on for action that the board, quite frankly, hasn't really felt there was enough information on, or that the board hadn't talked about this, the board could always, postpone the item to a future board meeting and direct staff, or quite frankly, could postpone it to a future board meeting that follows a study session on that item. but I understand what you're saying. You would rather the item not start at the board level on something like this. Got it. All
Right.
What
And
are your thoughts?
I'm thinking of another example. If somebody knew a bus company and would like to change the buses to something, and they want staff to do this huge report before we even as a team have decided this is something we want to put time into. That's what this is regarding.
Got it. Super. Any other thoughts? Aruni?
I guess, how is this really different than, I understand the topics that Bev and Jenny have brought up, but I mean, the only two people that would be able to do something like that without discussion would be the superintendent or the board president, right?
Right.
Otherwise, everything else is just a request for a report or a board member, one of us requesting a second to get something on the agenda. And then with Dr. Pletka's input, typically, we would decide whether it was action or some other type of item. I mean, I guess I'm just not understanding how this effectively changes what we do now.
But my understanding of where Deborah was going the other day was that are there certain items, do you want to have basically 2 readings? So for example, we have a board policy, and so we have in essence reading 1, and then you take action on the second item. So the first reading is information or discussion, and then you take action. My sense was, are there other sorts of items where you want to have in essence 2 readings? You bring the item for discussion, you get input, that input gets incorporated into a future item that then gets voted on in a second. I think that's my understanding of where she was going with that.
Is that a protocol or a bylaw though, Joey?
I mean, I think it could be either. And again, I think it would really need to maybe focus on what types of items, because of course some items obviously need immediate attention. But I think that the intent was more like resolutions. Was that kind of the idea?
I believe that's what the context was.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that I've requested the fact that a resolution not be brought to our board until we've had the discussion on if in fact we as a board have voted that yes, it is something that we all believe should come back. I mean, and I think that's kind of where that started. But Janny's example of the buses, you know, if one person goes and says, you know, I want to do this, and it's a lot of time. Again, it's how much time is spent on the front end of something before it comes to us as a voting body.
Yeah.
And I think that's where this came from.
Right. I think if this were intended to be something that is more specific and actually, I'm going to use the word rigid. If this is what you're looking at to be in place, I do think maybe it is more appropriate to be in the bylaws section of the board policies with regards to, and maybe even with regards to in the same section as agenda setting and agenda items, so that any agenda item that's related to a resolution would follow this process.
So what I'm hearing people say is there is a desire to have things put on the agenda if they're very important, and they might take up time from staff, quite a bit of time, to put it on the agenda first, to just have a discussion of it per se, whatever it is. And that would, Joey, correct me if I'm wrong, that would fall under a bylaw because it's specific. And so we wouldn't approve it here as a protocol. We would refer it to the future as a potential bylaw adjustment under agenda setting. Is that accurate, Joey?
Yeah, I think if you wanted to create a bylaw, that you could give us direction tonight, if that's the desire, to create this bylaw, and then in accordance with your direction, and then bring it back for a first reading at a future meeting, and then it could be adopted at a subsequent meeting. So it would take another 2 meetings to adopt that. A protocol, for example, the one we just talked about is more of a protocol. It's more of ways that board members, should be acting and should be handling certain situations. This does seem more like a bylaw. And so, yeah, if we're given direction to create that, we can put it on a future agenda for a first reading.
May I just chime in for a moment, please? I think that's actually the most pure and perfect example of the application of number 4 and why we shouldn't address it tonight. I'd also like to say that I don't think it should be, changing the bylaws isn't really on the agenda tonight. And so I would say again that that's maybe not appropriate, but let's just say a board member, so we're talking about somebody other than the president or the superintendent right now, wanted to change a bylaw. What would happen right now under our current protocols? Let's just do this thought experiment. Basically, you come to a meeting. Oh, maybe you email Bob or Dr. Pletka. Say, I heard this other school district has done something. I think we could streamline an agenda or bylaw that would help the district be better. Well, then Dr. Pletka might say, that's legal. That's more than 2 hours. You really should bring this up as an agenda item. Under number 4, that individual that wants to amend a bylaw, like it seems some people want to do tonight, I think we have a great system in place, but under 4, the person would then first have to say, I move to place on the next agenda this change to bylaw XYZ. You'd have to get a second. Then your change, this thing that you're trying to have a discussion on, then goes on to whether staff should even research it. Then you have to get over the hurdle of maybe moving it. Let's say it moves past that to another meeting. So under 2 here, then it comes on as an information item with some research. Then you have to go to maybe a 3rd meeting for an action item. Then the community may have public comment. If it's an idea that ignites the community or divides the community, you could have public comments that go and take your item to another meeting and yet another meeting and then a 3rd meeting. So from the time that you thought of this bylaw that's going to help Fullerton School District be better, you're looking at 3 months down the road, potentially. Just looking at our recent past. Those are all the reasons that I think that we should maybe just move on from this one right now.
If the bylaw were important, and it does what Janie mentioned, relevant 5 years out. I think that was Janie's perspective about when you talk about these things, not for the moment, for the future, then wouldn't it be worth 3 or 4 months out if it were important? And the thing about, okay, that's all I want to say on that. And the issue, I guess, is this something we want to look at tonight as a protocol? Is it something we'd like to defer as a protocol? Or is it something that the board has a feeling about to make a board policy? And I'm open for anybody to talk on that. And maybe we'll have more direction from Dr. Eckert or Dr. Pletka.
I was listening to there were important things. When I'm trying to visualize a board agenda, and when you have a board agenda, you've got consent and routine items of business, things that come up all the time. You approve these things under one vote. You're very familiar with it. They're very routine. and you need to take action on them to get them moved along. Then you've got, usually there's opportunities for board communication in some format. Then you've got action items, which basically are individual legislative action items that deal with individual topics. And in most cases, or in every case, I'm just thinking my own experience with it. None of these is coming to the board without information, either from a previous meeting or from communication that the superintendent has with the board members about the background to this item. And then you've got an opportunity for discussion, or sometimes people blend that into new business, where items can be brought up and the board can give some direction as to where they want this item to go. I would think that if there was an item that was coming up and placed on the agenda for action, that the board either knows quite a bit about this or should, regardless of how they feel about yes or no vote on it, either from a previous agenda or from what Dr. Pletka is going to provide. So those items that come up with no background, to me, would never find its way as an action item on my agenda. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it would seem to me that if there was a board member that wanted something on an agenda and wanted to hear how his or her fellow trustees felt about it, they would bring it up under new business.
I mean, don't we do that at the end of every meeting currently?
Maybe you do, yeah.
Dr. Pletka, did you want to say something here?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I think, are there items so large that it takes more than 2 meetings? And I'd say generally, yes. And generally we do that. As an example, board goals. I mean, generally board goals, we don't bring you the goals and then you adopt them the same day. That's not unique just to this current board. I mean, that's been true year after year. Boards generally want to look at it for a couple times. For sure, if we have new board policies, there's a first reading and a second reading. So I would say generally we do. What I understood from the board discussion is if there is language that you are going to craft on something and you're going to craft the language together, is there any value in having one meeting to craft the language, giving direction to staff to maybe consolidate that and bring it back to the next meeting? And I think the actual example I remember from the board discussion was resolutions where you're trying to develop language together. So, but generally speaking, I think the board does follow the two board meeting on items that are significant, and board goals would be one of those. I think the only question is, do you want to add something to that kind of process that you're doing, that you currently do for board policies and or something like board goals?
Yeah. I mean, let me just one other thought, and I'm anxious to hear what your thoughts are based upon what Dr. Pletka said. And I'm reflecting back to Rooney's comment. Many times things will get in front of you and it's timely, that you'll need to act on them. You're either going to act, you're either going to approve it or you're not going to approve it, but there's a timeliness to getting it done. It could be a contract. It could be a purchase. It could be, there's a timeliness to getting it done. The board always has the ability during that discussion to postpone that item or to request more information, to put it on a future board meeting. Typically, as you know, board policies require 2 readings. I think and I'm just thinking, Bob, I'd be interested in your thoughts too. I think you run into a danger when you start identifying things outside of board policies and start putting 2 or 3 readings to this thing. Because you can get into a situation where you have a timeliness to getting things done.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, generally speaking, I mean, I think where you have items, I generally think 1 meeting is enough. I think the one part that makes it hard is on language, where you're trying to build consensus or even agreement on language. Sometimes I do know that's challenging, not necessarily for staff, it's challenging for the board. So, you know, one piece too is I do agree that tonight is probably not the night to reach consensus on this item. And so of the items, I think this one would be a good one to bring back for a future meeting. We've been making some pretty good progress, I think, on some of the previous ones, but however the board wants to proceed.
Let's see what the board thinks on that. Janie?
I'm good with putting it off. I feel that this is really an important item. I don't want to see this go away. If it's part of bylaws, then we need to look at that. But I like the language in this, and I think it's critical. I don't like the idea of somebody popping something on that I don't know about and the community sees it on the agenda and all of a sudden we have a room full. Like, we're going to close, we're going to change the boundaries for Laguna Road School. Somebody had that great idea and then it was on the agenda and we came to the meeting and went, are you kidding? These people were like, they knew more than we did. So those are the kind of things that I like the language of this particular protocol. Whether it's in the right spot or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
Beverly?
I have a question for Mark with new business, because we don't have new business on our agenda. At that time, somebody brings something up at new business. Can you have a discussion about it? Or is it just something because for us, the end of your agenda, somebody could say, you know what, I really feel strongly about, you know, the pepper shakers in the cafeteria. I want to talk about that. As long as I get a second, then you could talk about the paper shakers. But you don't have that conversation at the meeting because it's not agendized. So no matter what, you can't talk about if the rest of the board, if only 2 people want it. So now, you know, and so that's my question is if it's new business and it's not an agendized topic, can you talk about that?
Right. And maybe, Joey, you need to, in my response, I'm only going on my experience. The board is meeting in public. Something comes up. We always had a new business section or a board discussion section where people can bring things up that were on their mind. And it could be that someone says, you know, I've been talking to a number of people and they brought up an interest in, now, I mean, this is a hot topic whenever you talk about boundary changes. I'm going to use that as an example that I think Jana used. You know, and they were talking about how the boundaries just don't seem to be equitable. And there needs to be really some consideration on boundary changes. Well, you know, when you do that, there's a whole process that precedes it ever coming to the board. But a board member could say, you know, I just wanted to raise this because it's come to my attention from people in the community. Is there any interest in staff looking into something like this?
And we do that all the time. I would say, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where Dr. Pletka or somebody might say, I'll get you a report on that. I'll send, right.
So
that is kind of like new business though.
Exactly.
I mean, sort of.
So Bev, even though, as Rooney said, even though it's not on the agenda, this never was on the agenda.
Right.
The board isn't taking any action on it.
Well, and I understand that.
I think there's a limit on the ability to discuss, actually.
Right.
Yeah, I think that it really can't go any further than if it's not referenced in the agenda. I think it's really, the new business is a lot like the future agenda items.
Right.
I mean,
so that's not that, and I guess my point is that's not what that's not the intention of what this is. And so I agree with Janie. This is important to me.
Got it.
And so if we can't talk, I mean, it was important enough that we all thought it was important enough to
Got
go on Deb's letter. I mean,
Got
it was something we talked about and said it was important.
I get it. I get it.
So I'm okay not talking about it tonight, but I do think that this is something that's concerned me for years. This is not
Right.
new for me.
May I
This
make
is
a
something-
suggestion here? Perhaps Bob and his team can come up with a protocol and or a bylaw that encompasses what they've heard tonight on this topic and bring us one or both back to chat about at a future board meeting so that we don't let this drop, but we have some substance from which to think. Does that feel comfortable?
I'm okay with that.
Rodney? That's good with you,
Everyone
Jan?
okay? Good.
Okay, so let's put
Good.
that, we'll pass that on to our superintendent.
Good. So
That's a
that
future
one, we're gonna bring back.
We're
We're-
gonna bring it back.
We're gonna count that against your 2 hours, Hilda.
Actually, it's a board decision, so it goes to the whole board. That gives me 8 hours. Good.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so that progress toward action is going to the board. And you know, I'm really glad that you guys decided to bring it back. And I do think it takes, because I think that the heart of this issue is what gets on an agenda. It's not about new business. It's about what gets on an agenda. So, you know, I think you do need more discussion and thought about this. So good. All righty. Let's move to number 5 then. And this one, you're going to have to help me with a little bit. This is board deliberation. And, you know, the item is introduced and the president calls for a motion in a second. If there's no second, the motion dies. If the motion carries, it goes forward. Trustees use the opportunity to deliberate to reflect on the item in light of, and then it goes on, I think. And there's a 3 and a 4, you know, there's the board deliberate, there you go. Trustees use the opportunity to deliberate. And then there's an A through E, and then trustees give the board president permission to bring deliberations to a close. What is the issue with this one?
Personally, I don't see an issue. This is very straightforward. We've just line out what you can do, call for the vote. This is all in ed code.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a whole lot of
Yeah.
discussion.
Do you guys, do all 4 of you feel, are you in consensus that it pretty much is what you do and you're?
Yeah, I'm not really
Really?
sure how this is different than what we've done
Yeah,
in the
Do we
past.
need a protocol on that?
Your current board policy says that you follow Rosenberg's Rules of Order, which I think that this is kind of in line. I think that the new part that's outside of what your kind of parliamentary procedure is the listing of what really the focus on what you're reflecting on. That language seems to be, not necessarily captured in that protocol, but I think it's other places in your board policies.
This might have been another case that this is a topic that many school boards need, and it wasn't a serious
No.
topic for us because we do it.
Mm.
And Deb may not have gotten that spirit from us.
got
But
it.
yes, and Joey, thank you for pointing out the part that is new.
Good. All righty, so everyone's pretty comfortable with the way it's written?
Wait, so by moving on, are we saying that we're taking this, or are we saying we don't need to take it because we already do it?
I don't think we need it. Do you
I
guys
don't think we need it.
I would like to exclude this and just continue with our
Okay.
current
So
practice.
you're not adopting this language, you just feel you do it already.
Right.
There's no need for it.
We don't.
Yes.
I don't think you need a protocol for something that's already in Roberts or Rosenberg's rule.
Thank you, everybody. I think that's great.
No need.
I thought that I was saying, thank you for clearing it up, Aruni.
Great.
Okay, now, unified
you.
board, number 6.
Good. Number 6 now is unified board. and you can read it there. Is there any concern with that?
Can we take 5 minutes, please? I drank 2 sparkling waters. and-
Oh, no, you know what? We've been on this for 2
You
hours.
can have 6 minutes. Go ahead. Let's call this adjournment for how about 10 minutes, Rooney? Is that good?
Well, I mean, we have 8 topics tonight, right?
Right, we're on number 6.
Let's do 5. I'm ready.
5 minutes is good. Great.
Please, thank you.
Everybody take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
Hey,
We're ready to go.
all righty. Rooney, no more sparkling water.
I got some tea.
Here's to you, Rooney.
Good for you.
Cheers.
Good for you. All righty. Is everyone,
I have that cup too. We all have that
oh,
cup.
look at that.
I saw Jenny's cup and I remembered mine, so.
And mine's in the kitchen. Can't hear you, Jenny. You're off. Okay. Our next is Unified Board.
Good. Well,
You're on.
I read that. That sounded pretty good to me. I mean, what are your thoughts about Unified Board?
Jenny, you want to make a comment?
It's a good protocol we all need to follow.
Aruni?
It works. I mean, I guess the beautiful thing about a board protocol is, like we've all discovered, you know, they work until they don't, and then we talk about it again.
Right.
Beverly?
That's fine.
Okay. I think we can take this and move on.
Great.
Board meeting timing. This is a
All
weird
right.
one.
Now, this is my number, what is it, 7?
Yes.
I've heard you talk about this in length. We actually talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the meeting. How do you feel about moving ahead with this? Wasn't this the one where you decided you wanted to start at 6 because you normally have been doing that, and then go to 9 with one extension? What are your thoughts about this?
We've been starting at 5.
Oh, at 5. I'm sorry.
Yes. And 6 to the public.
Got it.
And I thought we said
5
that
for
10
closed
was
session.
okay.
But if we can extend it one time, then we can go to 10, right?
We had put language in there that we could, it got real wrapped up because we could say, oh, you could extend it one time for 1 hour. It got way too wordy. I have no problem with changing it to 10 and leaving it, and don't do the extend it one time. Just,
Okay, Beverly?
I had a question mark on it only because I thought we had already, this was the only protocol that we did the last time. And I thought it was the one that we actually finished. And I thought it was 10.
Sure.
Can I jump in? That's what I remember as well, that you guys basically were going to adapt or change the protocol to our actual start time, which is 5 o'clock. And that I thought there was consensus that it would go to 10, and then you'd have one time to extend it beyond 10 if that was such a desire. I thought that's what I heard.
Me?
That was my notes as well, but it wasn't a protocol. It was to amend a current board bylaw, which has all that information in it, which is the bylaw on meeting conduct,
Got it.
and that we would be revising that.
Right.
Good.
So that brings up a wholly different point, but I think we did agree on the 10. I think we did agree on one extension if necessary. And I thought that the other point was that our meetings, again, if we increase the frequency to what already is stated in the bylaws, that is going to release a lot of pressure and really deal with the issue of very long, very overloaded meetings, because we'll be meeting more frequently. So I thought that was the whole package as I understood it. But if it's a bylaw, then we shouldn't be talking about it. But maybe this is another one we move to put forward to come back to because we want to change it as a bylaw.
I would agree with that. I think that we should, address this one bylaw as well, making the changes and have staff bring it back to us.
And I agree also. I also remember at 10 o'clock, but I do think we need one possible extension, because if someone's in the middle of saying something at 10 o'clock and we need to go to 10:30 to finish it all off, nobody should say, oh my God, you can't go on, because, so we need a little flexibility. And so we can bring this back because it's a bylaw, not a protocol.
All righty.
That's number 7.
Well, that was number 7. We're moving, I believe, to number 8. I do have to make a comment about that. I remember that this was the whether, and I agree. I think coming back as a bylaw is probably the wise thing. This was the one thing we did accomplish my first time out, and my batting average wasn't very good. So I'm going to count this as still the one thing we did well the first time.
You're great, Mark. Go ahead.
All righty. Okay, I have as number 8, this is individual board members meeting with staff. And, my only thought is, I'd be interested in your thoughts about this and whether we can reach consensus. I think this, to a certain extent, goes to the heart of what the board's role is. That would probably fall into that. But take a look at what that sentence says. And what are your thoughts?
I hate this protocol. It doesn't work.
Yep.
I think that understanding why the protocol is there, I think that there's a difference. I think that as board members, at least in our district, we have a PAL program. So we have a relationship with our associations. And so we have a two-way conversation. I think that what this might be precluding or alluding to is the fact that we should not be bargaining with our units, right? We should not be the ones going and saying, oh my gosh, you guys need this and we need to do this. So I think that's the issue. I think that meeting with them to talk about, what's going on, just kind of keeping everyone in the loop, what have you, we've done in the past, and I don't want to not do that. But I also think that we also, as board members, need to realize that our job is not to bargain, and we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble if we start to bargain with our associations. And I would be interested in hearing what Dr. Pluck has to say about this one.
I was going to say,
And Mr. Sanchez.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, this is the one where I said, I don't really think we have a problem with this. And I know this is Fullerton, and I think the truth is, I do know that board members do talk to principals. I do know they talk with the associations, and guess what? It's okay, because we have this sort of relationship where I do get a call and say, hey, you know what? This is what happened. So I don't find it a problem. What Beverly said could be an issue. Again, I don't see this as a problem with this board somehow negotiating with the association. So I don't see that as an issue. The only other, again, not for this board, but future boards, is this idea that you don't direct staff to do something. And again, right now that hasn't been a problem, like I said. So personally, I don't know if you need a protocol unless you're trying to protect this for the future. And I think the board, there's actually other protocols about, I think further up, about not addressing concerns or complaints in terms of trying to solve those issues. And again, I don't think the board's had it. I personally don't think it's a problem, but unless you guys want to do this as a future item for the board.
Joey, is there law on this?
Well, there is the concern about what's in labor law called direct dealing. And so the concern isn't so much about having, I don't think, conversations with principals or staff members generally. The problem comes where you're dealing with individual employees on, working conditions outside of the negotiating process and outside of dealing or talking with their designated representatives. And then that's what's called direct dealing. And so I don't believe that that's been a problem, but it seemed to me, at least that's what, when I'm a labor lawyer, so that's what caught my eye when I saw this was, well, that's part of what this is trying to address.
But we already have that in law.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. There is, the PERB law, the Public Employment Relations Board, and the ERA specifically prohibit direct dealing. Yeah.
So it's there. Aruni, do you have something to add here?
Oh, yeah, it was more of a comment. I understand what Trustee Berryman is saying, but I think the protocol should just as well read, no board member wants Dr. Hammett's job. Sorry, Chad.
I'm
Can
not
we-
sure anybody wants Dr. Hammett's job right about now.
Can
Yeah.
we move on from this one? I really.
Go
Sure.
to number 9.
I don't
Okay,
think we
so-
do.
Person of the board.
But what I mean to say is, can we delete it rather than?
It's already covered somewhere else, yeah.
It's law.
Alrighty, so we're gonna,
There's a piece about spokespersons of the board. It almost should be a
that's a
separate.
separate one. That should be number 9.
That's what I have it.
Alrighty.
And just so that you all know that is also the topic of a board bylaw as well.
So we already have that, Joey?
Well, there's the specific board bylaw, which let me pull up, that basically talks about the designation of spokesperson with regard to the board president and the superintendent. And then it goes on to discuss that it's the same protocol that discusses that if you're speaking as an individual board member in a group, as an individual citizen and not necessarily speaking for the board, that there's the practice is that you need to announce that, hey, I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. I'm speaking, as an individual. And so that's part of what's already in the policy. Let me just pull that up. It's called public statements. It's board bylaw 9010. And that's what it addresses, but there's the part of it that basically indicates that the government, it says that board members, we recognize their right to freely express their views and encourage open discussion. The board believes that effective board members have a responsibility to express themselves. When speaking to community groups, the media, or other members of the public, individual board members should recognize that their statements may be perceived as reflecting the views and positions of the board, but they have a responsibility to identify that those are their personal viewpoints and not the viewpoints of the board. And it says all public statements authorized to be made on behalf of the board shall be made by the board president, or if appropriate, by the superintendent or other designated representative. So any change related to something like that would affect this board bylaw.
I think we should bring this one back with further bylaw discussion later, because that bylaw is very
Comprehensive.
right.
Okay, so I have that being brought back. Hilda,
Bylaw.
I had a question on number 9, and you might have already addressed this. Was this in any way related to the discussion? The board took some time at the beginning of the meeting to craft some language and ideas for that letter regarding LCAP. Was there any connection with this number 9 to boards, the board action as it relates to or involvement with committees?
That's about as direct a connection as there could be.
I think
Right.
so.
So I'm just wondering, and Joy, you might need to help. Does this, you were making reference to this number 9 being a board bylaw that we could bring that back. I just want to make sure we didn't skip over the discussion relative to board members within committees. And
I think part of that discussion in that bylaw that we actually had, we had it teed up for the first time we met, was going to be in conjunction with regards to that very issue, that if a board member is participating or present in a public, in a committee meeting or otherwise with the community, that there's an obligation based on that bylaw on the part of the board member to make known that if they're not speaking or haven't been directed by the full board to speak on their behalf, that they're speaking as an individual and not for the entire board.
Got it.
So that was part of that conversation.
Got it.
Mhm.
Thanks, Joey. Does the board have any thoughts relative to that? We're bringing this whole thing back to talk about this bylaw.
Why are we bringing it back if the bylaw says everything that it needs to say? We
Oh,
don't need a policy. The bylaw says it. All this
okay.
bringing back stuff is just reiterating something we don't.
All
need to
right.
do we? Just ask.
I don't think you do if it's just related to the specifics of the bylaw. I was questioning the board as to whether there was need for further discussion in the expanded, with committees in
Right.
general, but maybe the bylaw covers it.
The only thing I can say is that, and Dr. Pletka and I had a conversation about this, is that the bylaw, while it's comprehensive, does very little to give direction or perhaps a protocol as to how our process by which the board, an individual board member would do that, and whether or not that's something that needs to be clarified. What I mean is, does it need to be clarified on what needs to be really said to a group of people? And I don't think it's necessarily needed, but I do know that Dr. Pletka and I had that conversation. I don't know, Dr. Pletka, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah,
Joe, I have a
I just-
question. Before you say anything, Dr. Pletka, I have a question.
Mhm.
We have these bylaws and we have these protocols, okay? And if this is a bylaw, basically, and it's already there, what do we do if people don't follow bylaws or protocols? I mean, what is the purpose of having them? And if they're not followed, what?
Well, that's an interesting question in the sense that a lot of bylaws and board policies are bylaws that are related or relevant to how a board member should conduct themselves. A lot of times are policed, so to speak, by the rest of the board. And so unless there's something specific in a board policy or board bylaw that creates some type of consequence, so to speak, really the only thing that you can do, and I don't know if you've seen, but it's something like a public censure where actually at a board meeting a board would vote to say, okay, well, or you violated but it never should get that far. I think basically what would happen is that it would be brought to the attention of either the superintendent or the attorney that a board member is violated or is violating board protocol, and that a discussion would be had either through a separate board meeting or separately to discuss those issues. Now, there are some board bylaws that have a little more bite to them, so to speak. And so, but it's not frequent. I don't see a whole lot of that, but there are some bylaws that will have something more specific to say that, for example, that there is some consequence, such as maybe you don't get your stipend for that month, or you're not allowed to hold a committee or a board office or something like that.
Thank you. It was just, here we are discussing all these policies and bylaws, and sort of to what avail? Okay, Dr. Pletka, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were going to speak.
Yeah, I think, this does go to the LCAP discussion. I actually think what you directed us to write could be the sort of disclaimer that we as a staff that we can include that for all future meetings. The piece is people really don't understand generally this whole idea of the role of the board and what is the board, that do you need 3 board members to actually authorize action, that it happens at a board meeting, and that, generally people think that a board member can simply, in some cases, go to a meeting, say this is the way it is, and then they have the impression that it's that simple. And so I think there was some misunderstanding at the LCAP meeting. And I think, in fact, I've heard from several of them say, I was under the impression that this person had the authority to do that. So I do believe that the clarification that you actually gave in the LCAP letter is the sort of clarification that could come in either future meetings if needed, or maybe it is part of the protocol itself, or it's just something that staff lets committees know that, board members may come in and say hello, and maybe they express their opinion, but they are expressing it solely as an individual board member, and that authority that they don't actually have the authority to either approve or not approve, that it takes the majority of the board. So I guess trying to look for ways that potentially the misunderstanding doesn't happen in the future. And like I said, maybe it is as simple as utilizing some of the language from the letter.
Okay, good. Well, I didn't intend to lengthen the conversation. I just wanted to make sure, and I'm glad, because I knew it was connected to some more in-depth topic. So where's the board with this? Are you comfortable that the bylaws address this? Is there any need to go further? Where are you with any protocol that addresses this, or do we allow it to stand?
Bev, do you have any comments on that?
No, I'm just looking at the it's a bylaw. I don't know if we need a protocol that supersedes or does the same thing a bylaw does. Again, I know we have lots of bylaws that need to be updated and such, but I'm okay with, is that the question? Do I want?
Yeah, Bev, I just, it seems to me that with Joey's explanation of what would happen, clearly if there was a board member that stepped outside, remember, you just wrote a letter or directed staff to write a letter with your input. Obviously, the idea would be that doesn't repeat. So maybe what you have in place right now is good enough.
Janie, ideas?
No, I like the idea that the bylaw, because to me, a bylaw is stronger than a protocol. And if the bylaw says it, it's ridiculous to be redundant.
Got it.
Rooney?
Same, I think. I would like to see maybe number 9 removed here, and then I thought we did remove number 8.
We did remove number 8, and number 9 we were going to bring back and discuss as a board policy.
Initially, but then I think based on now the full discussion, it seems like there's a plurality for not repeating what a bylaw already said.
Well, we're not going to do a protocol, right? Because we've already got total consensus. I agree with you. But yes, was somebody saying something? But we did discuss bringing back the discussion of the bylaw. And do people want the discussion of the bylaw? Bev, Janie, Rooney?
No, I think that was maybe the first thing that I said when council, Mr. Sanchez, stated that this is already covered by a bylaw. So then I jumped in and I said, well, if we're discussing other bylaws, we can bring this back. But having heard the whole discussion from the shared document that we're all looking at, I'd like to see it numbers 8 and 9 removed.
Okay.
Oh, from this, absolutely. I think we all agree that we don't want 8 and 9. The question is, do you want to add anything to the bylaw? Next, we have use of electronic communication and social media.
Right.
Woo! That's
And-
a 2020
Yeah.
topic.
This wasn't a problem when you began, Hilda. We didn't have this problem when we started. But I have down that Dr. Pletka was going to address this issue. Dr. Pletka, were you going to?
Yeah, again, generally, I haven't found this to be an issue. I mean, if you want to have a protocol, and again, if the goal is for future boards, generally, I think the board does respect this. I think the Facebook posts are very appropriate. They're very supportive. But again, this may be something that you see as the future, but right now it's really not been an issue.
Got it.
I see this as a bylaw because again, I think that it's more of, I think you can get yourself into a lot of trouble as a board member by having, you know, posting stuff and then as a board member talking to another board member and going to some of those sessions at CSBA conferences where they talk about social media and board members. So I don't know if it's a protocol or if it's something that, you know, it's more of a, you shall not do, you know, you shouldn't do this because you can be, you know, breaking the Brown Act or what have you. So I don't think it's been, you know, I don't go on social media very much, so.
Well,
I don't
you know
see
what,
it.
I think this is something that we have to consider, like Trustee Berryman said. I just, as you were saying that, I didn't even think about it, but what if I tweet something and Bev tweets it and then Jenny tweets it?
Mhm.
Is that a series, Joey? Have we violated the Brown Act?
So if you're just tweeting information and you're retweeting information, now what would be problematic is if you tweeted, hey, I think we should vote on, this topic sounds really good. I think this is something we should do. And then the two other board members are starting to chime in and now it's a discussion as opposed
Even if
to.
you like it, yeah, if I like it, it shows that, oh,
Mhm.
she's gonna vote yes. I mean, I think it gets.
So you do have to be careful. I actually do trainings on this very topic. And I've, you know, kind of been working through that over the last, I started probably about 10 years ago working on the issues, particularly as it relates to employees, but more recently, particularly with, you know, political issues, that it has become an issue with regards to boards. There is a district social media policy, but
Yes.
it's not specific to board members' use of social media. So I did want to just to point that out, that you do have something that kind of guides the district's use of its own social media.
There's a CSBA one, so I mean, there's got to be a CSBA policy if we don't already have it in our bylaws.
Right.
I'm sure there's one there.
Mhm.
No, I mean, CSBA does those. I've gone to so many of those sessions.
Right.
Right.
That's where I learned never to do reply all.
Right. So I
Even-
mean,
even
should we, can we direct this to be just an additional board bylaw using the CSBA template as what, because that's kind of what we have done in the past, is use them.
Right. There's bylaws that I'm aware of that are more related to board members that I do think it's a good one to have. And so that is something that we can look at and work on.
I was just going to add, I'm fine with that, but perhaps we should engage our counsel in one of those training sessions before we vote on something that's going to possibly affect us, you know, if we're unaware of how
Yeah.
the law could be applied against us. So I like the suggestion of bringing it back as a possible bylaw, but also taking further board action and availing ourselves of our counsel's advice.
That's really good, because then we can get together one more time and have a meeting.
Yeah.
I actually like this protocol only because I think it's a good reminder. All the points that are on this particular protocol, we should be reminded of that all the time. It's protocol. It's all, they're bylaws that are a little bit more legal. These are just the daily in and outs. And I think the protocol's good.
It's something that comes up quite frequently, in particular when there's, hot topic items that come up. I frequently have had to talk to and deal with issues where a particular board member, wants to specifically engage in some type of discourse on their own personal Facebook, but relate it to, something directly related to the district. And so there's a fine line between, First Amendment issues. And again, this is some things that I talk about, but, and your ability, and then also your role as a board member. And those lines can be clearly crossed. And so I think guidance is always helpful. Mhm.
Now, I have a question. I like this very much, by the way, and I agree with Janie about it being a protocol. But my question is, you spoke before about some boards have discussion on what to do if board policies are not followed. Is that something you would recommend?
I don't know. I think it really is up to a board to decide if they feel like if the board, like I said, generally boards, and I think this was part of our conversation before, and something Mark may have discussed is you kind of self-police each other.
Right.
You kind of make sure that you're following the protocols and behaviors. If there's a concern that there is whether it's continued violations of a policy that are causing the board not to function appropriately, or creating issues with regards to the mission of a district, then maybe it's appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate in every situation, but
Yeah.
I can see some situations where that might be something that could be useful.
Right.
I just didn't know how often boards have that. Mark, did you want to say something?
Well, I agree with what Joey's saying. The board, when in most cases, when you see violations of something here, it's usually done, it's either accidental or it's done maybe out of anger. It's sort of a spur of the moment thing. It does get that person into trouble. I know that we've dealt with districts through leadership that, have gotten into trouble with this, with one board member. If you have a rogue board member, which clearly the majority of districts do not have, there may be a need for disciplinary action. And Joey, doesn't the board reserve the right anyways to, to I don't want to say discipline another board member, but maybe, to direct that person to stop? Does a board have a right to police their own?
Yeah. And so I think that's kind of the idea behind just a general public censure of a board member. If that's the case, it usually would actually happen in a public session where the board, because you can't act outside of a board meeting, right?
No, it would have to be.
And so they'd have to agendize it and actually indicate publicly that they agree that a particular board member has violated or continued to violate a board policy, and essentially direct them to follow the policy. And so I don't think you need a board policy to do something like that.
Right.
If you wanted to take any more affirmative steps, then you would need one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, you do have that right. And, I'm thinking back over 18 years work, as a superintendent. I think the closest I ever came was when we had one board member that repeatedly in public made fun of another board member. And that only happened once. I mean, that was the only time in 18 years we ever had that. This board member had a stutter and they publicly made fun of that. And the board needed to seek some counsel in terms of a censure of some, or a threat of a censure. But it doesn't happen very often. And usually boards, it's as Joey says, it's within your rights. So.
Hey, thank you guys for explaining. Appreciate that.
So Danny, you said you like this as a protocol too. Does how does the board feel in general? Do you want to drop it? Or did you want to carry it? Did you want them in both places?
I like the idea of the keeping this as a protocol because it's a guideline as well as a bylaw. I see this as a guideline. And I'm going to use this opportunity to ask Joey to give us a little insight legally, because when we're at the board dais, and of course, right now we're doing all the Zoom stuff, what are the, I don't know, protocols? What are the legals with having cell phones and looking up documents during a meeting? Can you give us some legal guidelines about that? Because that's getting very relaxed. I'm not talking about us, but I'm beginning to see that with council meetings that I watch and different meetings that I watch. What are the implications of the cell phone during these meetings?
Well, I think the biggest concern would be discussions between board members outside at the meeting, sharing things that the general public or maybe not all of the board members are able to see. And so if there's some type of discussion going on behind the scenes, you know, between a group of board members, say through texting or otherwise during a board meeting, I can see that as being considered a meeting outside of the Brown Act noticed agenda meeting, even though you're all 3 or 4 sitting right then and there in a meeting via Zoom. And so there is potential for some abuse because it's so easy just to pick up, you know, your phone and text or get on a chain or whatever. I guess the other thing is that if you're sharing documents, that not every, because if there's this came up at one of our meetings recently where we were creating a new document. And the rule is that any document that once it's being shared with the board or majority of the board, that it has to be made available to the public at the same time. So if there's, I mean, an individual board member can, you know, I don't see a problem if you're like at the board meeting and you're searching for something like a board, you know, something on the district website or whatever. I don't see that being an issue. But if you're sharing a document, trying to influence the rest of the, say, hey, this is something we should consider before it's actually presented to the public, that could be problematic. And the bigger no-no is during a closed session, if you're somehow communicating with other people outside of the closed session via, you know, a phone or text or something like that. So so those are kind of and making sure that in the closed session that you're in a completely separate room, doors closed, no one's in or out, and that we're, you know, following those protocols. So those are, I mean, there's probably, I could do an hour training on it if you wanted, but I think that there's a lot of issues that really come up. Mm-hmm.
So if you say, you know what, I want to look up a bylaw, I'm sitting here and I'm referring to the bylaw just so I could read it. That's okay. Because
the bylaw is public. It's public.
Yeah.
It's already on your website. It's not anything that I'm thinking, like, let's say you had a draft of something different and you're only sharing it with 2 or 3 other of your board members while you're having a discussion. I think that would be a problem.
And then what you said about closed session, I repeat that because it sounded like you shouldn't even call your mother. Well, I can't call my mother anyway, but.
Right. No, I mean, like if you're, I'm in my office in closed sessions, probably about 5 or 6 hours a week, believe it or not, or at least this week I have been. So sometimes, you know, it is that I'll need to make sure that, you know, something's going on with the kids or whatever, and I can text separately. I think the bigger issue is if you're having some type of discussion with folks that are not in the closed session about what you're talking about in the closed session.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, here's an example, Janie, would be you're in a closed session and you're discussing bargaining negotiations. There's a board member who is very close with the union president. The board decides to adopt a certain negotiation strategy, and that person violates the confidentiality by sharing the strategy with the board president. Excuse me, with the union president. Joey, that would be a violation. That actually is a violation of the Brown.
Yeah, that's a pure, problem
That
with
makes-
regards to that.
That totally makes sense to me. I
Yeah.
mean, I see the hard line, but now
But-
with everybody in cell phones, everybody's sitting at the dais and I'm not saying anything about us. I'm watching other.
Right. No, it happens. That's not what people are concerned about. But there is strict necessity that, people aren't coming in and out of the room while you're in closed session. I mean,
Right.
even if it's my 4-year-old daughter, I need to make sure she's the only one that accidentally has done that to me. But
4 years old already. Oh my
she's
God.
5, actually. I can't believe I got it wrong. She's 5. Okay.
And I think what you're talking about too, Janny, is that, it's so easy to check emails and to do things while you're at the dais. And I think that it's always nice for us to remember that we're at the board meeting, we should be present at the board meeting, that, it's the perception of everyone else out there on, what you're doing up there while they're talking. So I get what you're saying.
Got it. Okay, so with all that said, Janny, what is your position with, you were arguing for keeping this as a protocol. Is that still what you'd like to see?
I would like to see that as a guideline and a reminder but I don't need to go up the hill on it.
No. How do the rest of you feel?
Bev?
I wanted something that, I think I get confused on bylaws and protocols, because a bylaw seems like this is something that you really need to do, and that it's more, this is kind of like the law. Whereas a protocol, we've had people on our board that have said, it's a protocol, I don't really need to follow it. And so, I mean, is this something that says if you don't follow that, you could get into trouble? So I look at that as, okay, well, then you should follow a bylaw. I mean, I just get into the fact of, what should we be, how should we do it so that it has the importance that it carries. I don't care either. I mean, I don't mind either way. But I just want to make sure it's not going to be something that someone could say, oh, it's just a guideline, I don't really care, I don't have to do that.
So Joey, what is the difference in influence of behavior between a board policy and a board protocol?
Yeah, the board policy, well, I specifically a board bylaw is the way I interpret it is because there's board policies and those are usually more district-wide type policies, labor and employment, students. The bylaws are kind of the body, the section of the board policies that specifically deal with how you as board members conduct business. And to me, the bylaw is very specific, rigid, and board meetings will start at this time and end at this time, or this is how many votes it takes to pass something. A protocol, I think generally, and I think it's a misconception, and I have heard this from board members, but that to me, a protocol is that you as board members, when you adopt a protocol, you're basically agreeing that you're going to try to honor that protocol. But I think protocols more are guidelines on how you as board members will conduct yourselves, and so I don't think that there's as much weight to protocols, but I do think that they should be followed and honored too. I don't think you can just blindly say, I'm not gonna follow this protocol. But again, I think that the bylaws are really more, the strict rules on how you're going to conduct the running of board meetings and board business and interaction with the public, et cetera. So I can see this one. I've seen it as a bylaw, with regards to the social media and board's use of it. But I can also see it as a protocol as well. I don't think this one's like a little wobbler to me. I think it could go either way.
Yeah.
Rooney?
What was the board's response when the previous board member said that they're not going to follow the protocols, that they didn't have to? Was there a question of legal counsel of how to censure that person?
Are you asking me,
I don't
or are
know.
you asking Joey?
I'm asking Trustee Sugarman if there was a similar response.
Well, that board member did follow the protocols. That was an offhand comment. So there would be no need for censure or anything done. It was just a comment.
With regard to the issue of number 10 here, I agree with Trustee Meyer that it would be more appropriate as a protocol than a bylaw.
I do too, because as technology changes, and we don't know what that's going to be like, and as our state comes down with more rules affecting what boards can do, I think it will be easier to adjust this as a protocol than as a bylaw. And over time, there will be changes that need to be made because the world evolves, and that's just how it is, and that's good. The world should evolve.
Yeah.
Let's see, now let's take a sort of a fingers up or down. How many think that this is okay as a protocol? Okay, consensus. Thank you. That makes it easy. We
Yeah.
can get rid of that last little dot there because there's nothing there. That's for the future. We
Right.
like the future. I want to thank everybody for working so hard to get through this list. Could you tell me what else you'd like to talk about, Mark Ecker?
Well, that really was, I made a commitment to myself that we were going to get through these 10, and we did. And thank you very much for that. I'm just going to do a little summary for you at this point. What I have is that we've adopted pretty much, the board's adopted the protocol on board member requests. The setting of the agenda, there was consensus as it was written. Community complaints. So numbers 1, 2, and 3, there were, there was consensus. Number 4, the board wanted this brought back to a future meeting. That was number 4. Number 5, under board deliberations, there was a general thought that there was really no need for this.
Right.
Number 6, under unified board, there was an adoption. There was consensus to that. Under board meeting and timing, you were going to bring this back as a possible bylaw.
Correct.
That was number 7. Number 8, under individual board meeting minutes, there was a general feeling by the board that there was really no need for this.
Correct.
Meeting with staff. Number 9, that's the spokesperson, the whole issue with, I think we expanded it a little bit to the committee work and the committee relationship. I have down that it needs to be brought back possibly as a bylaw discussion.
Correct.
9?
Time out. That one's already a board bylaw. We don't need
That's
to
already a
deal with it.
board bylaw. There was,
But you wanted to add the committee thing, right?
yeah. I didn't, I thought that you wanted to include that as general. I don't believe you needed it brought back as a protocol.
Yeah, I got the sense that Dr. Pleckio might address some of those issues in the letter, but we didn't need to address the protocol any further.
Got it. All righty.
I thought 8 and 9 were going to just be deleted from today's list.
Yeah, I have them deleted as a protocol.
Right.
Number 8, no need for that, but I thought, did you want under number 9, correct me, Rooney, this is not brought back at all. This was just something that Dr. Pletka was going to deal with.
Or that it's already addressed in the bylaws and that
Okay.
we.
Is that everyone's understanding? Got it. All righty. And then the 10 was you wanted to keep number 10 as a protocol.
Correct.
And that really gets through the list I had, Hilda. Those were the 10, following up to try to get some conclusions that we started on the first meeting, and looking at Deb's list. And with my discussions with Dr. Pletka, I believe we've handled the issues regarding protocols to date.
Wonderful. Thank you for your leadership in that. Joey, thank you for helping us with legal questions. We really appreciate that, because that's very important to us to do it right. And Carmen, if you'll get rid of the shared screen, if you don't mind. Appreciate that. Hi, everybody.
May I ask one question just for clarification? So right now, under board protocols on in our books and on the website, we have a couple different things. So is this going to replace everything that we have? Or are we just adding to, I mean, is that a clear question?
Yes. Dr. Eckert?
Well, I'd have to defer this to Dr. Pletka and find out what he wants to do with other existing protocols, but
Maybe we need a communicator.
My understanding is you're not superseding any of the protocols. The one that's already been voted on and agreed on, and then today you said at this point, we're keeping it as is, which is how an item gets placed on the agenda. It's already there, so we don't need to update it. I think there was some discussion about whether we wanted to add in kind of this verbiage about student learning, and my understanding is we weren't going to do that because we have it in someplace else. It's actually
Already in here.
in that protocol. So my understanding is we're not deleting, we would just be adding, and if there's already an existing protocol, we would leave it as is.
But that
And we
you
have
guys
this
still
page
need to
of all
formally
these
vote. Oh, I'm sorry.
We still
We
have
don't need to vote
another
on-
page of more protocols. I mean, are those staying? I just am trying to figure out, there's a list of purpose, board member protocols, and then superintendent protocols. That's all staying, and then we're just adding the ones that are not already covered?
Correct.
Yes.
Joey, would you like to repeat what you said?
You know, I was just saying that just from a process standpoint, just to summarize what will happen is that, and I know I've already said it, but just to clarify, the protocols that you've already agreed to or want to bring back, they'll have to be brought back at the next meeting for formal adoption. And that only takes the one meeting, and any discussion with regards to the bylaws will take, first and second reading.
fine.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I
If I understood Trustee Berryman's question correctly, and I think this is still maybe not been answered, because there might be some places where, Trustee Berryman, correct me if I'm wrong, but something that we approved tonight might still overlap in another protocol. So one we didn't need to address, one that, that's already existing that we didn't feel was problematic. And then still we may have one of those protocols that is in conflict with an existing bylaw.
So I tried my best tonight to make sure that I let you all know when there was overlap. And so I do not believe that, and when we go through it, I'll double check one more time just to make sure, but I tried my best to make sure that you were on notice if any bylaw or any protocol that you were suggesting would overlap or contradict anything that's existing.
thank you.
And can we get a copy of those, the final, well, obviously before the meeting?
Hilda, what I was going to do is maybe put a summary together,
Okay.
Okay.
of what, we discussed. And I'll send that to the superintendent. Did you want me to send it? And I'm sure he'll get that out to all of you. Did you want that summary sent anywhere else?
No, because Carmen can take care of all of us.
Got it. So I
And
thought I would just put this together in a summary document, send it in. And, because these were the protocols, my understanding were when Joey and Dr. Pletka and I talked originally, were the protocols of issue that needed input.
Yeah.
So if there are any others, I'm not aware of it. Those were the ones that we brought up to basically address.
So
Thank you.
just to clarify then, what I'm understanding is we are going to, on all those that we reach consensus, we will send those out to the board as a part of the board agenda. And so you would see it there, and it would be on actually next week's agenda to vote. Or I guess the other alternative is to wait to the next meeting. Either one is fine. Just some direction on that.
I would like to see us, I'd like to see it, get it by September 8th. Because we need to sit and read that. We got a lot going on for this next Tuesday night and school starting. Let's give you till September 8th to.
That's the next one, right? That's the next board meeting after this one.
If that's a motion, I'd second it.
Okay,
But you don't have to make a motion, just information.
correct, but
Thank you, though. That sounds really good
okay,
and very, very thoughtful. I want to take a moment first to thank my colleagues for their attention to detail and their attention to make these protocols really something that we can live with, and the adjustments, whatever, to bylaws the same. I am sure that Dr. Hemmett will have many more bylaws to bring to our attention in the next months to come as he updates us. And a special thank you to Joey Sanchez for checking to make sure we don't duplicate things and we keep it clean and good, and giving your professional opinion when needed. And not last, we like the opinions of our superintendent. We appreciate the leadership of Dr. Eckert. You really help us to do this in a timely, effective manner and come to good resolutions. So thank you all. And does anyone have any other remarks they want to make this evening, Jenny? No, I thought you were coming in for, otherwise our meeting is over, and thank each of you.
Hilda, I just wanted to thank the board as well. And you have, I cannot remember a time, I honestly can't remember a time when you have lived under so much uncertainty. If you were to be asked what school was going to look like in a month or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, when could we ever remember when we had so many questions on our mind? And with all of that going on, you took the time to discuss with your colleagues how, sort of the guidelines as to how you want to operate, because you're going to be making some very big decisions down the line. And I just wanted to applaud the board and the leadership that you're all providing. I really do. I'm so impressed. I wish I work with a lot of boards. I wish I could steal some of you and use you as models. I'm just very proud of our public education system when I see boards operate like this. So thank you for the opportunity to once again work with you.
I love it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wait a minute. I do want to, if I can find it quickly, I had something that I had today. Yes, I found this and I wanted to share this because it's sort of nice to keep us on track, right? We could learn a lot from crayons. Some are sharp, some are pretty, some are dull, some have weird names, and all are different colors, but they all have to learn to live in the same box. And that's what tonight was all about. Everybody living in the same box so that all of our students can live beautifully in the same box in this world. Thank you. We are so proud of our district for putting together wonderful plans for the starting of school, and so many, if this happens, then we'll do that, that we are not going into this reacting to situations. We know where we're going and what we're doing. And when the public asks us, we actually have answers. Thank you. Good night, everybody, and thank our audience for staying in. Good night.
Good night. Be
Good
safe,
night.
everybody. Bye-bye now.